Kansas City, I know that Father Morris and I are very excited to have the Serra Club convention in Kansas City this year. It's a big blessing to have such a concentration of people who are so passionate about vocation. So thank you. Yes, I'm Father Nathan Rueb. I've been a priest 6 years. Thanks be to God, I've been a vocation director for 3. And I have been a pastor for the last 2 years in a little church in Grandview, Missouri. And now I'll be, like John said, I'll be the pastor at St. Peter in Brookside, which is south of the plaza. And if you've ventured out to the plaza since being here. But my vocation is, I would say, centered around the Eucharist from the earliest days. I remember with rapt attention learning about the true presence of the Eucharist. I had the logic of a child that God placed in my heart. He said, well, or they told me if this is truly the body, blood, soul, divinity of Jesus, I thank God that I had somebody who would tell me the truth about that. Because that doesn't always get told even to first communicants. But I remember hearing that and then people saying the priest is the only one who can do that. And they said the point of your life is to go to heaven. So I put all those things together and say, well, I want to go to heaven and I want to serve God. And if God's in the Eucharist, that means I need to be a priest. So obviously I had to grow from that, but that was the selfish logic. I just want to go to heaven. So and then I wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be a priest 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And I wanted to go to high school seminary. It didn't work out because they didn't exist. I'd read about them in a book. But they kind of exist, but not really. So anyway, I went to high school and college. The reason why I'm a priest is because there were no high school seminaries, because I went to William Jewell, which was in this diocese. I grew up in Colorado, and I came to this diocese to go to college. And then I worked here in politics. Don't tell anybody. I'm trying to keep that secret. I don't, because if people start talking, they want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about politics anymore. So anyway, I worked in politics, and then I decided to be a priest. I was in Washington, D.C., and I was walking into my apartment, and God said, what are you waiting on? I've been waiting. I called you 2nd through 8th grade, and then you forgot about me a little while. It's time to get this going. So you're out of college. I went to seminary. And that was because I started doing adoration at that time. Had I not been doing adoration, probably wouldn't have heard the call. So Eucharist Center, that's the reason why I'm a priest.
I thought you guys would have thought that I was the one that played football. My name is Father Dan Morris. I want to begin by echoing Father Nathan Rueb with just gratitude for all of you, for your vocations, for your involvement with the Serra Club, and how you help foster vocations worldwide, really. So, Father Dan Morris, just turned 50 this past March, so I'm a later vocation. Just celebrated my 10th year of priesthood this past May, and I've been vocation director for a full 7 years now, heading into my 8th year as my time as vocation director. I grew up in Topeka, Kansas. I have one older sister. She's 2 years older than I am. I think the core of my vocation story is my mom's Catholic. My dad, to this day, is not Catholic, but fully supportive. I would say that being 50, what I did not grow up in was a culture of vocations. Nobody was asking me when I was growing up, even though we went to church every weekend and we were a faithful Catholic family. Nobody was asking me, what do you think Jesus Christ has made you for or is calling you to? And so, like a lot of young people, got swept up in the culture. Once I hit that 8th grade year, I would say as well. I didn't go to parochial school or Catholic schools until I entered seminary at age 34, but I went to Emporia State University for 2 years. There you are. Fingers up, right? For 2 years. And then I transferred to the University of Kansas for my final 3.5, graduated with a degree in graphic design in 1998. And then for 10 years, roughly, I worked in the Kansas City metro area as a graphic designer, mainly designing museums and halls of fame and visitor centers all across the country. It was during that 10 year in Kansas City that I don't have a reversion story per se in my vocation story, but I can say that until 2 years, I would say after graduating college, I didn't really make my faith my own until 2 key events happened in my life. I won't unpack these too much, but my mom was killed in a car accident 2 months after I graduated from the University of Kansas. She was killed on February 11th That's the feast day of Our Lady of Lourdes, 1999. And then 2 years after I graduated from college, a month into our relationship, revealed to me she was agnostic, came to know my story, asked, why do I believe in God? I could not answer that question significantly for her at that point, but that started me on an 8-year journey of wanting to be able to answer that question. And by answering that question, eventually realizing why I believe in God, why I'm Catholic. And let's just say I rediscovered something that God planted on my heart at a really young age. He's made me to be a Catholic priest. And like the one story that I want to tell more than any other story is the gospel story with my whole life as a Catholic priest. So entered seminary at age 34, Mundelein Seminary in Chicago, was blessed to be under the direction of now Bishop Robert Barron for 6 years. When I was ordained in 2015, he decided that he was done in seminary formation, so he needed to be going on to bishop because I was no longer there. So he's just like, why do I need to stay in Chicago either, right? 10 years of priesthood. I've never been a pastor. That's one thing I think is different than some vocation directors. When they're vocation director, they're full-time vocation director, and I really appreciate a lot of aspects of that. One aspect of our diocese is that, you're not sharing that with being a pastor of a parish as well. So much more to my story, but again, welcome to Kansas City. Glad to be here for this panel.
Background and
I don't need a mic, but my background is a little bit 20 years removed from Nathan's, but Father Reeves. I was also with William Jewell and played football, and we kind of have a running gunfight about that, which one was better at the time. But my wife's Catholic guilt is she always thinks that she stole me away from the priesthood. And I said, well, that's what Peggy Freeman would tell you, because she's like all Catholic mothers. I want a priest, but I never had an interest in that. But there was always faith in my life, a very strong Catholic faith. There are 3 Jesuit priests in our family, just a lot of good Catholics. But it does beg the question back to the two of you gentlemen that it's the age-old question. At William Jewell, my thesis, my graduating as a communication major, was based on nature versus nurture, not in the Catholic faith, but just in general, as a person's formation in life goes along. Is your nature or is the environment around you what really creates the person that you become? And I asked that question to the two of you. What do you all think when you're talking about the formation of either someone, a male or a female? Is it their nature? Are they born with that inspiration to become a priest, or is it the nurture, the environment around them that creates that vocational calling?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's always going to be the Catholic both and. I mean, God gives us our vocation, we believe, at our baptism, right? I mean, He plants that vocation in Jesus Christ in us at our baptism. Most of us baptized, and I would say just how God creates us, it's already there. Even like the baptism is the watering, in a sense, if you're baptized later in life. But the environment that you grow up in is definitely going to play a role in whether or not you're able to hear that call, whether or not you're going to be able to have trust in God to answer that call, and just have that cultivated to be moving always in that direction. So, I mean, we can tell 1,000 stories here of men that we've journeyed with, and the domestic church, the family that they grow up in, the culture that they grow up in, definitely plays a huge role in their freedom to hear and respond to that call.
As an add-on to the question, are there any other priests that have served as vocation directors, either currently or before? Not in the room. I wonder regionally, does it change? Do you think when you're not recruiting, but when you're inviting people to consider a religious vocation, does it make a difference when you're creating that message in New York versus California versus Kansas City? Do you see differences, whether it's Chicago and Mundelein or Conception? Is there is the consumer, the potential religious? Are there different ways of doing it?
Well, each vocation is a mystery, and each one of us, God dwells within each one of us, and He talks to each one of us in the depths of our conscience and depths of our being. And so, in a certain sense, we have to personalize each and every one. We have to encounter the man who is thinking about being a priest, and we have to see where God's moving or not moving, and move with Him, and ask him where Jesus is, ask him where he hears Jesus in his life, where he sees Him moving. So I would say it's certainly personalized man by man, and it is certainly culturally determined as well. I would think that the age at which a man is discerned or is recruited for the priesthood is the geography, the upbringing that he had. All those things certainly come into play.
Is social media, we were just talking about that. Is the climate right now, social media, the internet, just the world culture, the pandemic, all the different things, what are those opportunities and obstacles that presents in formation?
I'm 50. So you're the social media guy.
I'm 35. I don't have social media anymore. I did during the pandemic. I got them so I was a high school chaplain at the time, so I wanted to have some way to connect with people, but I found that it sucked me in. So as soon as I could get rid of it, I got rid of it. Our Pope is going to, I think, give us some really great advice. I'm looking forward to it because he's been talking about AI a lot recently, and of course that's not social media, but they're interrelated. So I'm looking forward to the guidance that he's going to be giving us, because that was one of the first things he said. That was one of the first priorities he enumerated after unity, was he wants to look at how technology plays into life. But I think technology can do a lot of good, and it can do a lot of harm very quickly. And so we have to be very careful. And I think we need to err on the side of technological sobriety with young men, because I find that there's a lot that can be said, but I think that technology has a tendency to suck people in and have them focus on themselves. And so I'm always trying to get young men to come out of themselves, to come out into the world, to seek to enter into flesh and blood relationships. There are relationships that can occur, good relationships that occur digitally for sure, but to draw them out to real relationships with priests and vocation directors and friends, and I think that's where we can truly find that's where I think we can find the call more easily.
I'll just add a quick clip to that. It was during COVID that I think one of the greatest blessings for me as an early time as vocation director was when everything shut down. What people were longing for most was encounter, community. And so I was not necessarily using social media at a great pitch, but I made the effort for 1 year to travel to Emporia State University and hold a discernment group there with 5 to 7 guys and their chaplain director every week on Tuesday nights. And Wednesday night it was KU, and on Thursday night it was Benedictine. And just the accompaniment of in-person gatherings when people are longing for that community and conversation and relationship, that's what cultivates and fosters the deeper reflection on one's life, and eventually the answer to the call that Jesus Christ would place on one's heart at that time. So social media can be good and bad. One thing that I do think COVID opened up with regards to social media is when you have the right platform and you're using it the right way, you look at Word on Fire. We have something called the Avila High Calling Program through the institute founded by Dan Burke, where more than 125, probably up to 150 men across the country are able to do an online formation program that maps to the academic school year. And it's formative for every young man that's doing that. You can see 149 other guys around the country who are like, I'm not alone in this discernment, right? There's other guys that are hearing what I'm hearing in terms of a possible call. And then it's evaluative for us. So that's an example of some good use of technology that opened up with those platforms online during COVID. So,
Father Rueb, I'll start with you with this question. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that young men who are discerning a vocation, they come to talk to you, and what are some of the misconceptions they might have about a religious life or a vocation?
Well, I I think young men don't realize the cost of discipleship sometimes, and I think I don't even realize it. Bishop Johnson sometimes will ask young men, he's my bishop, well, you also met him at the Mass on Thursday night. One of the things he'll tell young men is, are you, sometimes he tells us to men who can't seemingly make up their mind. He said, at some point you got to take a leap of faith. And what I've come to realize is I need to take a leap of faith every day that I'm a priest. I think it's not just that initial leap of faith, but every day to get out of bed and to continue to labor in God's kingdom. It takes an incredible amount of faith, which is all a gift because it all comes from God, and we just have to say yes and work along with Him. So I think that there might be a lack of knowledge of I don't want to scare anybody away by saying it's too hard of work, because it's all God's work. But I think that a lot of men don't realize the sacrifice that is involved.
Yeah, so I would echo that and then just add, I think that because the call, especially to the religious life or religious vocation, is the more it's countercultural to what the message is that they're hearing from the world and the culture, the more they think that they would never be happy by answering that call. They would never be fulfilled in a life of celibacy or whatnot. And so that's the first thing that I would say. I would echo Father Reeb in just saying, like, the conditions of discipleship. You know, whether I'm talking to Landry Weber, who's been a seminarian with our Archdiocese for 3 years, he played football at Kansas State for 5 years. When he was entering seminary for that first year, I said, whatever you experience in training and practices on the football field, this next year of your life is going to be the most difficult year, because now you got to go interior. Like, it's a lot more tolerable and easier to do, I think, the exterior weightlifting and speed drills and like those kind of things. But when you got to go to the level of the heart, like, it will be the hardest year of your life, but the most formative and the most rewarding year. So it has to do with that condition of discipleship. But the reward, God will never call us from something to something that is less. Like, if He's calling us to something, it's because He has a greater gift to give us from what we would leave behind. So
as a basic question, how do you go about doing the job? How do you find candidates? And what resources do you turn to or provide to them to help them understand their discernment? Go ahead, Father.
sure, it's first of all the Holy Spirit, and then it's not a work that any part of the spiritual life is never a work that you do alone. And so it's building relationships, I think, first with your brother priest and just all the contacts that make up the people that are, the church in your archdiocese or your diocese, right? And working together with it's relationships through and through. I'm blessed to be at a parish now. I was at the Catholic Community Center at St. Lawrence for 5 years. My first 5 years, my time as vocation director. And I just told Archbishop Naumann and the personnel board 2 years ago, if a parish assignment opens back up, I would love to move back into that space, because it gives me more touch points just as a priest with families and whatnot. But I mean, it was a month into being back at that parish for the past 2 years that I have the 6:30 a.m. Mass, because I always have a school Mass, a Catholic school Mass at 7:45 or 8 somewhere else. And a young family walked in, and this boy was 12 years old, and they were coming to Mass at 6:30 every morning, mom and 3 little girls, and then the 12-year-old was the oldest. And I just walked up to mom one day and I just said, does he serve? Is he an altar server? And he's been an altar server now. He was previously, but they were at a new parish, and he's been my number one altar server for the past 21 months now of my time there. But it's just those 5 minutes a day before Mass. You want to lead us in prayer before we go? Just building rapport with young men all the way starting at 6th grade. And that's the same for a high school guy or a college guy. It's relationship. It's relational. And so that's how I go about the work. I mean, obviously I'll hand them to Save 1,000 Souls at some point if that's where the conversation's going, and the resources that are books. But it's the points of contact and the journeying with people that's the main, how do I get in touch and cast the net wider and get to know more and more young men in our archdiocese at an earlier age, to normalize the call, to let them see that you can be happy by the way that hopefully I live my priesthood and vocation, just take it, like, entrust all that to the Lord at some point.
I couldn't agree more that the most important thing for recruitment is the encouragement of a pastor or a chaplain, someone who knows the young man already. That's 100%. I think that I was mentally going through our roster, and I think that that's the vast majority of the guys who make it are the ones who had encouragement or were gently guided by a pastor. And I also, what Father Dan said about high calling program is a great resource. Once a guy gets far enough into discernment, I think they offer that. I mean, accompaniment through some great speakers and thinkers, and then to see the other 149 men throughout the United States. So I would say the encouragement of a priest. Books, of course, are important. So I had the exact same wavelength on that question. So there's programs out there, or I think sometimes we have good intentions of going and saying, hey, I think you might have a call to the priesthood as lay people. And I think that sometimes works. But I think even better is to go to your pastor and say, hey, have you noticed this young man? Maybe you could, Father, not to tell you how to do your job, Father, but I see this young man thinking about, I think he could be a good priest. What do you think? And then, so I think that's good.
I'll say real quick. Just add one more thing, something that came across my desk a couple years ago in my time as vocation director, so it wasn't day one, but just the old axiom, you cannot love what you do not know, and you cannot choose what you do not love. And so, again, Jesus says, come and see. He says, follow me. Right? He doesn't give instructions in that first encounter. And so building bridges and taking guys to seminaries, and one of the things we tried to do with our Quo Vadis retreats, our biggest retreat every year, is from day one, it kind of happened accidentally the first year, but then it became the standard, is the more we can bridge that gap between the mystery of seminary formation and where a guy's at back in our Archdiocese. We brought in a seminary rector the past 6 years to give the retreat at our Quo Vadis retreat. And so they can get just that taste for 3 days of like, okay, this is the level of formation that goes on in seminary. And they're wired for that, right? So the guys that God's calling are wired for that. So of course they're going to just like, I want to be hooked up to the hose even more and keep receiving that knowledge that's leading me to, Jesus Christ and clarity around my vocation.
Can you speak a little more about kind of some of the details and specifics of that retreat? How often do you have a Quo Vadis retreat, and if there are other programs throughout the year that are weekend things or similar things where a young man can get away and just have some quiet time to reflect and then think about his discernment? Sure.
So in our diocese, I think most dioceses have a Quo Vadis retreat annually, once a year. It's our deepest retreat because it's obviously the longest retreat. It's 2 nights and touches on 3 days. It's right before Christmas, usually the full weekend before Christmas, so a Friday night to a Sunday at noon. The past 2 years, God blessed us with having more than 80 guys attend that retreat. We also have the majority of our seminarians are coming home, so they're home and they're present all throughout that retreat. So it's an opportunity for guys just to be like one-on-one, socialize, leisure time, prayer, like together with our seminarians, guys that can tell their stories and just like they can walk away saying they are normal. And I can see myself in that guy and that guy. Not all guys, but there's a touch point, there's an entry point. That's our Quo Vadis retreat. That's our deepest retreat. And I said the retreat master is usually a rector of a seminary at this point. Next year, this December, we're going to have Father Brett Brannon, who's the author of To Save 1,000 Souls, come and give our retreat. And so, great storyteller priest. I'll just say this real quick before I hand the mic back to Father Reed. One thing that I realized when I became vocation director, for better or for worse, it seemed like even our entry-level retreats or events, like it wasn't hard to look at like, how's that differ from our Quo Vadis? Like almost everything that we offered was the same thing, except just at a different stage. And so one thing I wanted to do was start to create a stair step of events so that a wider group of guys at a younger age would have their first encounter with the vocation office event, and somebody could just walk away and say like, that was fun. And then they associated fun and life-giving with a large room full of men. And it's like, okay, when I'm 2 years older, then I'll go to the Quo Vadis retreat because if that was fun, this might be fun and worth going to. So it's just built up a bigger net. I won't go into the details of what those programs and events are, but trying to differentiate those so that when a guy comes to the next one, he knows that he's going higher, right, and closer to a potential call.
Most of what I know I learned from Father Morris. He took me under his wing right off the bat. He invited me out to the Savior Pastoral Center, and he gave me a lot of insights that I haven't forgot. And we, of course, like you said, most vocation offices have similar offerings. We're lucky to have Conception, which is our main seminary for college seminaries, right here in the diocese. And so they have 2 retreats a semester called Encounter with God's Call. And we do have a Quo Vadis as well. And then we have come and see dinners. So that's sort of that low entry point where a pastor can invite a guy just to come and have a meal with other priests and other discerners. And they don't have to travel up north to their seminary for multiple nights. We also have what's called the one day encounter, where we take 6th through 10th grade up to Conception just for one day. We started doing that and seen some success. Again, because I'm following the Dan Morris model of trying to get involved earlier. So we're trying to bridge that gap. We used to have 5th grade vocation days, which were our diocese is in a transition point for how we do formation of the sacraments. So more to come on that. But we're trying to bridge that gap at 5th grade vocation day until junior year of high school, where they were allowed to go to encounter. So that's that bridge that we used. And yeah, so like I said, I learned it from you.
Well, I learned from my mistakes. There's 2 ways to learn from somebody else, right? I will never do that. I will do that, right? Yeah, just to highlight, so we no longer haven't, at least for the past 6 years, sent to Conception. Archbishop Naumann is from St. Louis, and so we chose at one point to invest our guys in both the college and major seminaries, one of our 2 seminaries in St. Louis. But again, those working relationships that we've had with St. Louis, they've had a summer camp called Kenrick Glennon Days for the past probably 25 years of their diocese. And so we've been able to bring 6th through 9th grade boys up for 3-day camps the past 4 summers. The first summer, it was just kind of like a pilot. So it's like, okay, let's get you guys in a homeschool van, and 7 of you will experience this. Well, this past year, we sent 46 guys to those 8th and 9th. And so it's like a really fun camp. The boys were elected pope. They had mock conclaves, all this kind of stuff, touch points. But that creates that fun thing that, I know these 6th through 9th grade boys now, and pretty soon, 4 years from now, they're going to be those high school juniors and seniors, and they're going to want to go back to Kenrick Glennon Days, not as a camper, as a junior counselor, and then they're going to want to take a college visit and be like, I'm going to go to classes at seminary, right? So that's the pipeline. It's necessary.
They don't have the white smoke.
They had something making white smoke. So yeah.
So here's a fun question before we maybe put it out to the and so think about it and just remember you're in a safe place, and if you say something wrong, John and I will get you out of here safely. We're Serrans, and our job is to support you. So what is the one thing that really would help you all as vocation, whether you're here in Kansas City or anywhere else, to help you foster vocations? But what is the one thing that makes your job harder when sometimes the lady with good hearts and minds is do something that's good at, so answer the first one first and give yourself time. But where maybe you might say to a Serran or a knight or somebody's like, I really wish you would have talked to me before you did that. What's the darker side of that question? And we'll get you out of here safely, I promise, Father.
No, it's a beautiful question. We need devotion. This is what Bishop Johnson said. We really need devotion. If we beg Jesus for something, he'll give it to us, and especially if there are multiple of us doing it. So we have to have devotion. This is something I've been rattling around in my head, and it's classic Christian. It's straight from Jesus. I think we have to learn how to fast again. I think we need to maybe skip a meal every once in a while for vocations, or something like that. So if Serra International wants to figure out a way to start doing a coordinated, simple fasting, I don't want anyone to put their health in danger, so get a doctor.
Why do you keep looking at me when you keep saying that? I'm going to tuck my...
And you can, Father Morris can say the stuff to help well. I'll think about the things to avoid.
Yeah, I think over my time as vocation director, my relationship with the Serrans has evolved to match kind of the events and the support structure for the events. And so, I mean, in my first couple of years, you talk about like, oh, I wish you would have talked to me before you went into that high school and became the face of the vocation office with good intention, right, to the young men in high school. I mean, I would say let us be the front lines in terms of like that encounter with young men. And yeah, communicate with us about like, here's my idea. This was just a one-off kind of thing. So this wasn't like our Serra Club in Kansas City, Kansas was just like doing this ad lib. But yeah, I think to recognize the proper role of all the parts of the body of Christ, right? And be that structure and support, starting with prayer and fasting. Obviously, you guys have the deeper pockets, right, in terms of like your generation. And so like a lot of these events come with a cost. And so like, how can we help raise funds to make that event happen? Write cards. I mean, a number of people are just like the support, the culture of vocation, just supporting our men, letting them know that they're loved, which Serrans do probably the best job at in terms of like a guy's journey through seminary, and they build relationships with all these families and all of you throughout their time in seminary and whatnot. Yeah, you guys have a lot of contacts. And then I say, just living your own vocation well, you have children who have your grandchildren, right? And so penetrating the next generation down and the next generation down to open up that conversation around vocation is where I think you guys have your greatest fruit to be born from your time as Serrans.